سلام دوستان عزیز، من پوپک هستم با دوست من خانم کارین شوارتز. ایشون از سوئد میاند، مرکز سوئد بزرگ شدن و بیشتر از 12-13 سال هستش که در فینتورن زندگی میکنند و باغ بسیار زیبا و واقعا پربرکتی رو اینجا درست کردن که نشون میدم به شما. امروز اومدم که باشون صحبت کنم و داستانشون رو بشنویم. خانم شوارتز، دوستان من در ایران.
Hello everyone. I'm thinking of telling you a little bit about my connection with soil and compost, which underpins the garden. It goes back some 12-13 years when my sister-in-law, an American author, was writing a book about cows eat the planet. And she came to Scotland to visit a specialist, an authority on worms and worm composting, Ron Gilchrist in Ayrshire, 6 hours away from here. And I went with my sister and met this phenomenal man, and I fell completely in love with his project. So I invited him to come up to Forres, where I had recently back then started an allotment and an environmental center called Transition Town Forest. He did come up and he spoke to about 10 of us about worms, and I remember the occasion very well. We sat in a barn, and one man excused himself pretty early on during the talk, and he just moved to the side and started doing something. And after another hour or almost 2 hours of Ron giving us this fantastic, inspiring talk about worms, the young man, a German man, came back into the circle with a big box. He had built a worm box according to the instructions that Ron had given in the first couple of minutes of his talk. This inspired Ron in terms so much of our sincerity and our willingness to implement what he spoke about. So he offered to come up again this 6-hour journey and bring 2 kilos of worms to make sure that the worms wouldn't be traumatized during a postal delivery. Lo and behold, a week or 2 weeks later, Ron came back and the same 10 people, we by then had 6 worm boxes. They have a very specific dimension. They need to be low and long so that the worms have the right amount of surface area to work in. And this episode started my love affair with worms and with compost. So for many years, I ran the project of these 6 boxes with we were probably 30 people involved in that. And then I moved to where I sit right now, 7 years ago. And when I moved in here, this was pure sand dunes. Nothing really grew on this particular area where we moved in. The garden was complete just sand. It had, whatever had grown here before, a little bit of gorse, had been ripped up in order to establish this co-housing. It's 25 houses in this little part of the park. So I had a strong need, a practical need for compost, loads and loads and loads of compost. And the worm cast and the worm compost formed one part of that. I then established many more different ways of making compost just with the leftovers of the plants, make compost with straw and hay, make compost out of seaweed, and hot composting, cold composting, long-term composting, and quick composting. And that is what has enabled me and helped me to create this garden over 7 years. It's an absolute haven now, where food and plants and flowers grow to their heart's content.
So, Carin, could you talk about the soul aspect of the garden.
Yeah, sure. I would say that this garden is my meditation, my spiritual life. I get out here at 5 or 6 in the morning. I wake up earlier as time goes, as I grow older. And I go out and I sit here and I just muse. Just watch the plants and the birds. I walk around, I see what's happened since the previous day, basically. What I see a lot when I sit here, which I consider to be the soul, is that I see the unseen. I see the soil, which is basically 2/3 of the visible plants, is the quality of the soil. So I sit here and I'm part of this garden, very much part of this garden, I would say.
Such a beautiful garden. So perhaps what we can do is walk around the garden together, and you can show us and we can see the garden and the gardener.
Lovely.
The invisible gardener.
Let's do that.
The garden. Thank you.